Yeah, this is the major project. Oh yeah, we are also, the startup flow includes getting data directly into your Jupyter notebooks if you're using Jupyter. All of that is part of this release, like basically improving the startup flow. This doesn't mean we are done with the startup flow, it's just improvements. I guess in the next we will be improving it further. So that's the hope. And that's it from my side. Do you want to go? Yeah, and I'm really sorry, I'm not really very well prepared today.
Me?
Yeah.
I can share my screen, sure.
Sure.
Okay. Desktop 2, share. Open system preferences. Please hold.
You should be able to share, at least from the permission set.
Give me 10 seconds.
Hey, Nance, we can also, of course, open up questions, anything that anybody else wants to share, or just in general questions. So that's the intention of this meeting. We've been trying to provide demos and deep dives when we don't have questions like this.
Okay, everyone can see, right? Sorry, I had to restart because it was not set up properly. So we are, as Gleb has pinged me, people ask why the current Flytekit looks so Python 2, i.e. antiquated, and the reason is because we were still supporting Python 2 internally when the project was underway, but we are hoping to modernize it. That brings in with it, we have a doc that is like partly filled out, partly internally inconsistent. So we're kind of going through a POC effort to kind of flesh out exactly what the new experience should be and ensure that we don't write something that is not implementable. So we're still actually deciding some of the more fundamental interactions. So if people have opinions about this matter, they should definitely feel free to speak up, ping us on the channel, and offer suggestions and whatnot, and point out flaws. So for instance, one of the things that we're thinking through is this right here, which is how should people use, how should people declare workflows? So for instance, you can see, I don't really have the current model on here, but it's something akin to this model in the middle, except that it's a, currently it is a class, not a function. We're toying around the idea of turning workflows into functions themselves. The benefit of that being you can choose when to evaluate it, and it's not necessarily evaluated at module load time. So the current model and downstream here is either a task or just a Python function. Generally, currently you say when you call a task, you assign it to a variable. That variable represents a node, and then you access the dot outputs on it, and then you can retrieve the variously named outputs. We are seeing if something like, if this would be more clear. It is very like explicitly assigning a, I guess this is like you can extract the actual Python native outputs in assignment if you want to, but you have to call that dot outputs on it. And then we can also potentially do away with everything and just ignore node, the concept of node naming at all, and just let people write native Python, which is assigning it to variables and then using them downstream. This looks cleaner. Not entirely sure if we can actually implement this. And there is also the question of how do you inspect the intermediate steps, i.e. extract the inputs and outputs of a given node if they are not explicitly named. So these are the kind of questions that we're trying to resolve before we dive deeper. As for tasks themselves, they're going to look like this. Basically, pretty simple, like extracting from annotations flight types. What a task's interface should be is pretty simple. I think we're going with, we're not going to allow people to name outputs, or rather, if you want to name outputs, you have to use a typing named tuple. If you don't name outputs, then we'll just assign an auto-incrementing output name. So this would be some output 0, call it. The type system between Python and Flyte IDL is mostly consistent. One of the things it lacks in some areas, like Flyte IDL doesn't actually currently support native tuples. We support lists, but there's no tuple. It can be rendered as a custom struct, but that seems not great. So we're debating some things around that. One of the things it does do that doesn't quite have a good parallel in Python typing is files. So if you think about it, if you return a local file as the output of a task, something has to be responsible for uploading the contents of that file into the Flyte durable store, which is S3, and something has to create the literal version. The literal version of a file in Python is just a file. The literal version of a file in Flyte is the location of S3 stored as what we call a literal blob. So that brings into it some interesting questions about how and why we're effectively, we have to tie the typing system to something that does file uploading and file management. So we're working, these are the kinds of things that we're working through. And the idea is that once we have answers to these, we can implement hopefully fairly quickly. But yeah, that's it. Any questions?
Hey, I think this would be a good time to share with everybody if you've not already seen. There is a Flytekit Enhancements proposal, which is fairly big. It has become a little chaotic because the amount of things that we want to improve and the ideas around it. We've tried to document everything in there, and so we'll share them. We are looking for people who really are passionate about how to design a pretty interface. Really, that's what we want to do. We want to design a pretty usable, user-friendly interface, and that is also. If you're the intention of doing this is that if you're a Python developer, this is natural to you, right? This is oh yeah, this just works naturally as I expect, because we completely realize that Flytekit is not natural. It's very forced on, and partially, as you mentioned, we started 4 years ago. There was it just grew on, and we're hold on, we should take a step back. Python 2.7 is dead. Let's just get Python 3 working, and let's just improve the interface. So anybody who has ideas, I mean, this is the best time to talk about. He has done a phenomenal job. Actually, he's not telling you as much as he's done. He's gotten all of these POCs to work, which is pretty interesting, except for the workflow one, but the tasks and everything that are working. We're trying to simplify the API landscape, essentially, just to one or four concepts that the user needs to look at and quickly ramp up on and start using. Any ideas about that? Does anybody have any thoughts? Any interfaces that they've seen they really like? Love to.
So if you're an opinionated Python person, now is a particularly leveraged time to make your opinions known, because once we get through this, we probably won't revisit it. It'll be baked into the backward compatibility contract, going forward. So if you care a lot about the aesthetic mouthfeel of your Python code reach out directly to you and make your opinions known. Because in big projects, you don't do redesigns like this very often. So it's a very leveraged time to care, and we'll do the best we can with the feedback we have. But now, if you want to jump in and make your opinions known, do it soon. And you can just talk. You can comment however you feel comfortable in the paper or directly with you. But he's driving.
There is a chat. Right, I'll share the document just in this chat itself so that people have it. But otherwise, we should pin it in the general conversation.
Okay.
Just a disclaimer also, like in the POC process, we've already noticed some things that are internally inconsistent. So it's not quite up to date, but it's mostly up to date.
That's all we have for the agenda. Anybody else have a walk-on they want to talk about? Problems, confusions, updates? All right.
Soren, I think Soren unmuted. Do you have anything?
Oh, hi, I'm Lior.
Hey.
Soren, did you want to say something? I also would like to after you.
I'm just gone.
Yeah, I put him on the spot. I'm sorry.
That's fine. I'm just on vacation, but today it's rainy, so I'm not on the beach, and I thought I can also join.
That's what it is. Yeah, I was like, yeah, you're supposed to be on vacation. Anyways, yeah, Lior, you could go.
One thing that is on our mind is that sometimes the startup time can be long, and we talked about how it's not appropriate for launching maybe thousands or tens of thousands of simultaneous tasks, and that there are other ways to do that. I think you mentioned Mesos, and that I wonder if there's is that something that would be interesting to include support for that some way where you can do things where you want to launch 10,000 jobs, maybe just make an easy pathway so to add some built-in support for that.
Great question. I think I should have covered that. That's the other part that we're working on. Katrina was not on that call, was working on that. So essentially, I'll tell you what happened. So with Flyte, few tenets are we don't want to rebuild things that exist in the world. Use the things as they are. So for example, if Spark is right for you, use Spark, right? But we found, and then in some cases, we want to fill in the gaps that don't exist. For example, we weren't able to find a very good, simple parallel map. And that's what I think you're referring to. Like, I have a corpus of data, I want to run 10,000 containers, take this data and push them through the containers and get a result out. And that's why we built something internally, which is available in open source. This is where the concept of dynamic tasks started. It has evolved and it blossomed into its own thing. We'll not talk about it for a minute, but the idea was that we want to do a map over a big list or corpus of data and run thousands of containers. Now, we realized Kubernetes doesn't really scale for that very well. So we started doing it in two ways. One, on AWS, if you're on AWS, it's available using ECS, which is not EKS, like the uncool version of EKS, that's ECS. The good part is it's so simple that it scales really well, right? It's like, it doesn't allow you to have pods and volumes and all of that funky stuff. So it makes it much easier to scale, much lightweight to start up. And we actually use a thing called a database batch, which is on top of ECS to get us queues, and they work okay, right? They work pretty well. We run about, many of our users run jobs in the 10,000 plus order, and they run fine on that. But our L5 team, which is the autonomous team, does not use database batch as much. They mostly use EKS, which is Kubernetes. And so we've been working with them to get the same functionality working on Kubernetes. It's not as easy. It's way more challenging. Even the state of the art in Kubernetes, which is queue batch and some other scheduler systems are not really, they don't, we have actually a lot of internal research on how we try to test them and scale them, and we failed. And with Flyte, one thing you'll realize, we don't release something that we are not comfortable with scaling. Right? It needs to scale to our needs and then to your needs also. But we found an alternate mechanism. So Flyte comes with a resource manager internally that has queuing semantics. So it automatically controls how many resources are used from Kubernetes. And then we are using something like queue batch. So we are aggregating both of these together to achieve the end result. And this is one of the things that's in focus for this quarter at Lyft. So we are hoping that we'll have something, I want to say end of September, maybe early October. Is basically the dynamic tasks with part support running at scale for tens of thousands of jobs. Again, not time bound, right? So you have to realize that when you have an array of 10,000 jobs, they are not time bound where you'll get QA, you'll get essentially quota management, and a slow release and so on. So all of that will happen, but that's the piece that we're working on. If there is specific needs on that, let us know. But I can share that document. I think it was shared, but maybe I'll share it again. Does that answer your question, Leon?
Cool. Cool. Thanks. Yeah. I'll look in the Slack channels for the docs.
Yeah. Don't look in. Like I just ping again. That's easier. Yeah, but we thought that that's a great value addition to non-AWS folks, because I don't think there is anything in GCP that does something like AWS does. And AWS the AWS batch itself is not great. It's kind of, there are problems with it at some scale. So we will introduce that concept. It is available today. You can actually run it. It's just, don't try to run it with 10,000 jobs. It will not run. It will run for like 100, 200. We have tried it with 2,000 and then it works fine with Flyte today. But
cool. Thanks.
Anything else?
Can I ask, what is the use case for running so many things in parallel? That's not how we do in Spotify, so I'm curious.
Yeah, I can tell you about our use cases, but I'll let Lior talk about his use cases. That'll be interesting for me to learn as well.
Yeah, I'm hopefully, I'm not, I might make a mistake in what I'm describing, so I'll try, hopefully I don't, but I think we are using dynamic tasks and running maybe on the order of 100 or 200 right now. And when we compare that with the runtime of that same work, this is processing of things that are in the blood. So processing of the wet labs that are come back from the results, from the assays that we do. Right, so we have to process them and featureize them and things like that for the classification. Yep. So we're looking at doing 100 or 200 right now, and those are maybe tasks that should take maybe 8 to 10 minutes each.
So this is, if I summarize, this is like a machine learning features thing, like.
Yeah, it's pretty basic data munging with Python. And like I said, it's it's on, some of these are long sequences, so there might be I don't know if it's gigabytes involved, but there's like tens of thousands, a list of 10,000 things or something like that, and you're going through it and you're doing lots of comparison with other lists and looking for differences. And it typically runs 8 to 10 minutes, on I think it's already using a few cores.
And Lior, that's specifically the data is nicely partitionable, right? That's a thing that you need. So because you could use Dataproc or Dataflow on GCP to achieve some of this, but one is cost and the second one is it's like a big hammer to solve a smaller problem. Is that right?
Yeah, and those might just, I think we might just not have looked into those as options. I think there are things we like about owning the workflow engine,
Yeah.
having more control and visibility in over it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think you could like launch a job from Flyte into Dataproc. But I understand your data. So I'll tell you where we use it, Nelson. So there are two cases. One is an unstructured data. And unstructured data means basically there is no schema associated with that data. For example, images. It's just plot. It's just files. And if you could use Spark, for example, to run it, but Spark really doesn't work that well with these kind of data types, at least in our experience. And we don't have a reduce step. There is no reduce. There's just a map. You take the data, you send it through a bunch of algorithms, and you get a transformation. So you're transforming the data, really. And that transformation can be done very effectively if you just partition, let's say, if you have 1 million images, run 100 copies of algorithm, 10,000 each, and you're good, right? That's really what the solution is. And so, but each one of them may use different sets of memory and maybe using GPUs in some cases. Using like maybe more cores or using algorithms that are written in C++ and Go. That's where, at least at Lyft, for autonomous and for or for some of our marketplace algorithms, we use dynamic tasks a lot. And actually, it's so much used that some people exploit it. Right, like for example, they have tiny amounts of data I could fit on one machine. They still run hundreds. It's just that one machine might be slightly slower, but our parallel thing runs faster. Or the second reason is that they don't know Spark. That's another thing, and we don't want to solve those use cases. But users find the actual Flyte API much simpler than Spark, so they are like, "Oh, let me just use this. It's so much easier to run." So that's like the abuse, but there are many valid use cases for which we actually built it. But if there are users who are able to get small abuse and make advantage of it, and it works for them, that's great. We are not going to stop that. So, does that answer your question, Nelson?
Yeah. Thanks for asking, and I hope that was interesting to hear about. And I'll check out Google Dataproc and Dataflow. And I don't know if we're interested in Spark right now. I think we've been using Dask, so maybe we would do something with Dask.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We actually were thinking of adding Dask as a plugin into Flyte, and if you guys are interested, we would love to work with you guys. It's actually an issue, so upload it.
Cool. We'll keep in touch on that, and I'll look for a chance to do that. I don't think, I think I'm not sure what our timeline will be for solving that problem. But
yeah, no, we might get to it. It's not even that much work. I've looked at it. It's pretty straightforward. And then it will be natively available within Flytekit. So you just install Flytekit plus Dask, and then it just works. That would be the integration. Okay. Nelson. Hey, Gleb, any updates on your Scala SDK? Maybe you should do a newer demo.
Yeah, I think we should do them again, but in 2 months, I guess we would add support for dynamic tasks and some workflows. So then they are going to do demo.
Oh, okay. That would be big, I think. Like dynamic tasks, I want to see how you guys do it. Don't do add dynamic tasks. We should talk a little bit more about it. Look at Flytekit Enhancement. Don't get into the mistake we did. But, yeah.
I think the dynamic task, it would just look like a task that can build a workflow, but also it has access to inputs from an API perspective. So I think in our case, it fits very nicely.
Yeah, and that's actually the right way to do it. So at dynamic task, we are changing a little bit where this is like Lior also said right now, right? That dynamic task is the array, which is not what it is. Dynamic task is just a way to spin off another workflow. Array is a different thing itself. And today they are kind of mixed in Flytekit. So that's one of the reasons why the enhancement is coming. We started with that. Cool. Right, nothing from my side.
All right, Cleb, I'm going to hold you that demo in 2 months. It's being recorded. So.
It's like a deadline-driven development. When you promise something.
No, I would just love to see a Scala SDK. That'd be awesome.
There is one. It works also. This is just like an advanced version now.
All right, all right.
Yeah, so if anybody watching this recording wants to try out Java SDK, please try it out. It works. You can run real workflows with it, like data flow jobs, whatever you want. And if you have problems, ask me on Slack.
Yeah, I've been trying to run it on AWS as well. So I have had one issue, but I will have an update by this weekend.
I had a quick question. So this is about dynamic tasks and how I've been using them, and I'm not sure if this is correct. But right now, like if I have a task that needs to launch another one, I've been making the parent task a dynamic task so that it can actually go through and launch them. Is that functionality going to change at all when we start using like the mapping, or is that okay? And also, second question, have you, like right now, it doesn't add the new task to the workflow graph. Am I like, do I have to do something else for that to be included, or is that something you guys have thought about adding?
Oh yeah, if you have UI engineers, help us. That's
yeah, I have no experience in that, so I'm just putting that out there.
Yeah, so the graph updates. So there are two views. You've seen the two views hopefully. There's a graph view and there's a list view. In the list view, all of them will populate, right? In the graph view, they don't, because the UI part is not done. But that will continue, right? What you are doing is to launch tasks dynamically is the right intention of dynamic.
Okay, great. Okay.
Not map is should be available, even like static maps will be available after the Flytekit enhancement. That means you should be able to just knowing the size of the array, you can just launch an array as a task itself, not dynamic.
Okay.
Yeah,
great.
so that's the difference. But otherwise, you can also launch a map dynamically, a Spark job dynamically, a SageMaker job dynamically. You can do anything dynamic. Basically, that's what a dynamic task is. And if you saw, actually, Jeev added a cool functionality where the parent task can be also anything now. So that's really cool.
Cool. Yeah, I've been using his dynamic sidecar task functionality, so that's been really helpful. But.
Yeah, we would love to understand what are you guys doing with it, so that we make sure that we do the right things when we build.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. So we can call it a day.
Going. All right. Okay, we'll send release notes when we cut the September release, and then if anybody has any topics they want to discuss next week or they want to present, we'd love to have somebody else present something that you're working on and you're excited about, even if it's buggy. You can just DM me or sign up for the demo sheet. Otherwise, we'll talk to you in a couple of weeks. Sound good? Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Have a good summer. Bye.